sorry that you didn't get to see all of it. I know that some of you have seen the film before that. Of course, honored to have had somebody make this film, and Corinne has not only made it, but just made it, I think, a beautiful film. And I've got to move this back over here. I don't know if they're seeing me. Laura, okay, so Corinne has made just a beautiful film, and one that as soon as it was seen by Mark Wortman at Alzheimer's Disease International, who I've worked with very closely over the last years, he said, this isn't just a message for Australia, it's a message for everywhere. And so he was instrumental along with Alzheimer's Australia in posting it on World Alzheimer's Day, so that not only through this webinar, but in other ways, people around the world have been seeing it, because I think it has a quite universal message. I don't mean about me or about my photos, but about the kinds of imagination we can bring to changing people's minds. And I have an early chapter in the book and a talk I've given sometimes. I talk about changing people's minds, about people's changing brains. And I think that's what we need to do. That the focus doesn't have to be on the change in the brain, which of course is what underlies this, but the focus that we can have and we have control over now, not down the road somewhere, is about how we can do something to change people's minds and make this a more dementia-friendly world. And as other people treat us better, that life gets better. So I think that's what the message is behind it. So I've been sharing this with everybody I can think of on the planet in the hope that you'll like it and share it as well once you've gotten the chance to see it. So what Laura's referring to with the slideshow is that one of the questions that comes up all the time when I've shown photos or at exhibits or other times is people ask, how'd you get to do something like this? So I put together a very short set of slides that I thought I would run through while I talk, so you can see something and not just hear me talking about where did this project come from. And this is just the last stage in it, but it's the most recent stage, not the last stage. I hope there'll be many more things that happen. So I'm going to try to pull that. Here we go. These are not my photographs. When I was a teenager, I went to see the Family of Man exhibit at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and it blew me away and had me say photographs can not only be beautiful, but they can really be informative, and they can help you change your mind about something and see something differently. So I was 15 and I thought, wow, I want to do somebody who does things like that. But for whatever reasons, I didn't become a photographer. I became a professor of sociology. And I mostly used words as the vehicles for trying to change people's minds about things and help them see things differently. But I always followed photographs. I looked at other people's photographs on things, and I hankered to do some of that. In 1998, I discovered that I had a breast cancer, and one of the things I did was think about, what do I want to do different? What have I not done that I want to do? And that urge to photograph came back, and I said, okay, I want to do this before I get to be as old as Imogene Cunningham in this slide. So I asked for an early retirement from Rutgers, and I said, I'm going to take a new life, and I'm going to be a photographer. I never had any notion it would turn into what it has turned into, but that was my goal. I didn't know what I wanted to photograph. I only knew what I would never photograph. And these were two topics. One is dying and the other is dementia. It's probably pretty obvious why I didn't want to photograph dying. The dementia had a little bit longer story, and that story comes from my grandparents. Both of my maternal grandparents developed what was then called hardening of the arteries while I was a young woman, and I handled it really badly. I didn't have any understanding of what it was. I didn't know how I should relate to them. I hated the places that they were placed eventually because it became too difficult to have them at home. Basically, those places just gave them 3 square meals a day and kept them safe. But they put them in front of television sets and said, there's nothing else we can do. They're disappearing. They're gone. I couldn't deal with that. And so I developed a strategy for thinking about dementia. This cartoon, when I saw it, reminded me of something, and I thought, yeah, well, that's about what I'm going to do. Spot it, laugh in its face, and run for my life. And that's what I did for many years. So I knew I wasn't going to photograph it. When I started photographing, I decided that I needed to find something. I took a master class from an American photographer, Mary Ellen Mark. She's a documentary photographer, and she was running a master class for 10 people in Oaxaca, Mexico. I told her I wanted to find a place where I could photograph something over the 10 days. I'm not a good street photographer. I don't like sneaking up and taking pictures that people don't know. So she assigned me to a municipal old age home. That was about the last assignment I wanted. I thought, I can't deal with an old age home. My grandparents were in an expensive one and it didn't work. So what can I expect from this? But I went there and I photographed, and I was pretty pleased with the photographs I took. I'm showing you just a few of them. There wasn't very much happening there, but what I learned from there was what did work. And what worked was having somebody interested in you, having something to do, being able to tell your stories, being able to laugh, not just sitting there with nothing to do and no stimulation. That didn't happen very often, but when it did, I saw those were the key elements. And at the end of the workshop, Mary Ellen said to me, find another place to photograph older people. You clearly did a good job. You were respectful. So I was going to Del Mar, California for the summer. I asked a geriatric psychiatrist friend about where I might go. He put me in touch with a woman who said, tomorrow morning I'm going to the place that I think has the best Alzheimer's care that I know of. I do a support group there once a month. Meet me there tomorrow morning. I really didn't want to go. I knew that I was going to hate it, but I was afraid if I told her, she wouldn't find me another place. So I showed up the next morning. One of the people I met was Hilda. Oh, I have to say, first of all, that from the first 5 minutes I was there, I thought, this is a whole new ball game. This is a different thing than I ever imagined was possible. So Hilda in this photo was one of the people I met. She didn't remember where her room was. She didn't remember if she had eaten lunch 15 minutes before that. Interestingly, she remembered she had met me from one day to the next, although she didn't remember who I was. She was always warm and friendly, but she didn't have much memory. However, I also discovered very early on that this is the same Hilda. And when Hilda went to the piano that was in the hallway, she could play 200 to 300 songs, and she could sing all the words. And that's where I got this idea that I've elaborated in the part of the film that you were able to see that said, it's not like a crocodile that just takes a big bite out of your brain. It's like a mouse that's nibbling on it, and things go, and sometimes they're not gone permanently, but there are some things that last longer, and our job is to find what's still there and to nourish that and to keep that going as long as we can. Hilda died at the age of 103 only about a few months ago, but up almost until that time, she was still playing the piano and still singing, so it was pretty amazing. The role of music was clear to me also from the work of this wonderful and gifted music therapist. I followed her around like a puppy. She came every Monday. And interestingly, Goldie, who's dancing with her here, not supposed to be able to lay down new memories, but she remembered every week that at the end of the session that Heather did in her wing, Heather would dance with her. That was a new memory, and it was very strong. Heather also worked with people who couldn't come to the group sessions. In this case, Hannah was on hospice, so Heather went down the hall and found her, and this picture got selected by the American Journal of Public Health to represent healthy aging and an issue they were doing on it. And I thought that was great. Here's a woman with late-stage Alzheimer's who's on hospice and is dying, and she represents healthy aging. And that's right. She was healthy, and she was thriving in this place. Heather worked with people until the very end. This photo was the beginning of my starting a second project, which I'm not going to show you today, on end-of-life care. Remember that other elephant that I was never going to photograph, but it was quite amazing. And the last one I'll show you from this place, it's Silverado Senior Living in Escondido, California, was Edith. And Edith arrived the same day that I first went there. She had come from another facility where her daughter had said, I don't think my mother is that sick. She's been bedridden for 2 years, but I don't understand why she needs to be bedridden. She brought in a doctor as a consultant who looked at her and said, she doesn't need to be bedridden. It's to help the staff that doesn't know what to do, and so they're over-medicating her. Edith's mother changed her to Silverado, and this photograph was taken 7 weeks later. And the last week that I was there, Edith was part of a group that went on an excursion to the Del Mar racetrack. She, like some of the others, didn't know there were horses running around, but she had a wonderful time. She loved being out in the world. They sang in the bus going and coming. It was just a great, great day and a wonderful ending. But it wasn't the end of this project, because I then made a book called Alive with Alzheimer's. This was a book just about my ideas about what was going on there, and saying we need more places like this. people saw the book. It got some excellent reviews, and then I got invited to have exhibits in other places. So this was in Kyoto at an Alzheimer's Disease International meeting. This one is in Nice, where I had moved. That was the other thing I said I wanted to do that I hadn't done yet, was to live in Europe for at least 5 years, and we made it 11. We came back to the U.S. only last October. But this was in Nice, where I had a number of exhibits and connected with the Alzheimer's group. The exhibit of 36 photos was adopted by the Munich Alzheimer's Association, which took a set of it and traveled it around libraries and schools and churches all over Bavaria. And in this case, they brought it to the Bavarian Parliament on a day there was going to be a vote about extra money for Alzheimer's care. So I thought that was pretty cool. The photos were like the ones that I showed you of those people, but this is the one that got used by the press most often to say something about my photos and about the book and about the exhibit, because it reaffirmed people's ideas of the tragedy of the losses being the thing that we had to talk about, whereas that was the only photo like that. The rest of them were saying the losses are there, they're real, they're very powerful, but that's not the whole story. Let's look at what's still there and what we can do to keep those things there and to make those things nourish. So those invitations to show the photographs didn't come with airplane tickets in those days. I'm happy that nowadays they do. So I had to pay my own way. And one of the conditions that I made when I accepted invitations was find me examples of the best care that you know for people with dementia in that city. Arrange for me to photograph, and I'll come and bring the other photos. So I now went to Japan, so that when I had that exhibit in Kyoto, and some photographs that those of you who know the book will recognize, and you would have seen them on the wall in the film, or you'll see it there. These were all in Kyoto, and they were in group homes in Kyoto, and they showed exactly what I had learned back in Mexico, that it's smiles and it's laughter and it's peace and it's being treated with respect, and those things that are what make the difference. Peter Whitehouse wrote a review of the book and then invited me to come with him while he did some consultations in Cleveland, and he helped arrange. These two were while I was with Peter, and then he arranged for me to photograph at a wonderful place called Heather Hill, where I got some more photographs. I wasn't really trying to do another project. I just was trying to get some new photographs to say, it's not just that place. This is an approach, this person-centered care that works, and it's important, and we need to know about it, and we need to use it. I, again, got a lot of attention to music and music therapy, and saying what a gifted music therapist could do to lighten people's days. Then I connected with this service in Nice, where I was living, and I started attending some of the memory clinics that they were running, and people were laughing and they were having a good time. This wasn't just, like going back to school. They did lots of things. They brought in things. They talked about stuff. It was really so powerful and important. And I loved being there. I saw all these things. And then Philippe Robert, the psychiatrist in charge of it, said, let's line the corridor with these photos of people. And let's show them this is their place. So we made a permanent gallery there. Also went to Paris to see where one of the programs that had been started at the MoMA was running, with people going on excursions to the museums. Cindy Bayat ran this one at the Louvre, and came back to Nice, and we developed a program with 7 museums in the city and took people around to the wonderful small museums in Nice instead of to one large one. At the Matisse Museum, a gifted teacher there had people also draw sketches like what they were seeing that were done by Matisse, and you saw the pride that people took in doing things. This woman, I love this photo because this woman had been in a number of things. She was always sort of bent over a little bit, looking very anxious. And this day she made this wonderful sketch right afterwards, and her shoulders were back. Her face was beaming. She clearly knew she had done something really good, and I think that this picture speaks for itself. But we went to all the museums, and everybody had a wonderful time. In next door, Monaco, they set up a group and had an intergenerational group that painted kites. Then they released up and down the Riviera, 700 kites on World Alzheimer's Day that year. And people looked at this photo and they said, that's wonderful, this little girl with her grandmother, or is it her great-grandmother? And I said, it's somebody she met an hour before that at the most. This isn't a relative. We have to break this idea that it's only family that can bring joy into other people's lives. That lots of us can do that. Lots of people can do it. I went to India and got photographs there, thanks to Jacob Roy. These photographs got used in some of their all sorts of work that they did. I actually made 2 trips, and so that some of these photos are from trip 1, some of them are from trip 2. I met wonderful people and incorporated these into it. Daisy Acosta was the president of Alzheimer's Disease International at that time. She invited me to the Dominican Republic, and she arranged for me to go to the slums in town where people were nonetheless getting people who were coming out to them and helping them. And Daisy took me also to families that were in part of her psychiatric practice. It was really a wonderful experience. Laura was with me the day that I took this photograph at Judy Berry's wonderful place in Minnesota. Again, people said, "Oh, that's so beautiful. There's this picture of this young woman and her grandmother. They had met less than an hour before." If you've seen the book, Elsie has this really grouchy face before that. She was not going to participate in this stupid activity that we had set up. And at the end of it, she just threw her arms around Jody and gave her a big hug. So again, it's trying to shake up our ideas. Pet therapy is great. I have a lot of photos with pets. It doesn't work for everybody, and things that do work for a lot of people don't work every day. So I particularly like this photo, even though we don't see Judy's face. Silverado has places in Texas, and I photographed at some of those. Each of these has a story behind it that I can't tell you today, although a little bit of the story is in the book and the captions for the exhibits. We took the exhibit to Canada, and they said, "You've got to photograph our drum circles. They're great." And we had a beautiful drum circle that day. So only a few photographs from Canada, but they made it into the book because it was such a joyous day. Back in Japan, this one I have to stop and tell you about because I'm sure you're saying, "What in heaven's name is that?" It was a party at a group home in Japan. I went back to Japan, and they said, "We can have a party every day. We don't have to wait for there to be some official occasion." So that day they put out pans with flour in them and candy put into it. They put hats on everybody backwards and had people bob for candy. When they picked it up in their teeth, like picking up apples when you're bobbing for apples, their face was covered with flour, and then they took a mirror and showed people their faces. They took a camera and took a photograph of them. And some of the people, like the people in the background on this, hadn't wanted to get their faces full of flour. So the staff, which had done it, went around and kissed them, and everybody had a face covered with flour. This one, too, I'll say just something for a minute. I should have known better by now, but I saw this and I said, "What are they doing with this man here? How can he possibly do anything?" He was brought in by his wife to a music therapy group, and the answer to what can he do is that was less than 15 minutes later. So I shouldn't have known to give up, and you shouldn't either. This is still in Japan, art therapy, and that's what yielded the book that Richard showed you and that Laura showed you, and that I hope some of you have or will look at, because it's full of words of wisdom from Richard and many others. I decided I learned from all of them, so I didn't need to write the text. I could get them to look at the photos. That exhibit of that, we took to 10 cities in India by putting it on these kind of stands that we put up at conferences. So it went to medical schools, to senior living places, all kinds of places. It was for 6 months at the National Academy of Sciences in Washington. And here's Richard Taylor and Judy Berry, who were wonderful and came down to see it. We had it at the Michael Schimmel Center for the Arts at Pace University when the book was revealed. All these photos, by the way, are on my website, which is lovelossandlaughter.com. Here's Judy, who flew in again. She's been a wonderful friend and support. When we were in New York, in Glasgow, Scotland, I had banners outside. And even this one, which is huge, you can't imagine how big this was. And it was right, anybody that drove out of the parking lot at the bus terminal saw that. And it was in a building full of color, and it lasted there for several months. It was at an Alzheimer's center in Madrid. It was at a wonderful, beautiful private gallery in Salamanca. And there, the Queen went and saw it. This is my only picture of a Queen seeing my exhibit, but I'm proud of that one. I couldn't be there that day. It was in London. Some of you I know were there, where the was put up in conjunction with the Alzheimer's Disease International Meeting in 2012. There are some friends there. Pieces of it were in Nice. They've been used in the World Alzheimer's Report 2009, 2010, 2011, and in 2012. Some of the photos all the way back to Silverado, and plus some of the new ones, were in this report, which was a joint report between AGI and the World Health Organization. So you can imagine I was delighted. Now, the background to this is all the background to the exhibit. The last things were that Ida Boutros, who you saw at the beginning of the film, saw coverage of this exhibit that was in the New York Times in March 2000, somewhere between March and May 2012. And she said, we need this exhibit here in Australia. They contacted AGI, they contacted me, said, could we get it here? We arranged to ship it there. We had some support, and they got support from Nutricia and from Lilly in Australia. We shipped it there, and they've made a program of shipping it around to 7 states, 7 cities for 7 months as the keystone, the key element in their program. They also flew me over there for 3 weeks in March of 2013 to photograph. Here's just two of the photographs that are new photos that have only been seen in Australia. So I took a lot of photographs there. This one, the next one, I think may not show up, but I hope it does. So this was a couple in Melbourne. This is a cover article that was put up in the Australian Journal of Dementia Care. And we added 22 photographs to the exhibit. So this is the exhibit in Melbourne. It was just extraordinary. This is the exhibit in Melbourne. This is Gary and Mandy, who you saw there. And while I say my last couple of words, we'll keep this up. But again, you have the listing that's come from Laura. And I'm not going to show Laura the rest of these because I've talked long enough and we should open it to everybody. But really, I couldn't be more thrilled at what the Australians have done. I will tell you that there's a second set of the photographs. Right now, 20 of them are on exhibit in Palm Springs, California, where I live. But I'm trying to get active again to find new venues. So if you know of places that would be interested in hosting it, please get in touch with me or be part of a motion to get it there. I think that's enough. I'll make some other comments, but without this, so I'll try to unshare my screen, Laura, and get it back to you. And then we can open it to everybody.
Okay. Thank you very much, Kathy. Okay, I'm going to open up the floor. Kathy, thank you. I'm going to open up the floor. You can use your Zoom group chat to type messages and ask questions of Kathy. Kathy, how did this how did your exhibit become central to the Australian Dementia Awareness Campaign? How did that, you mentioned it very briefly with Ita Butros, but.
Yeah. I just saw this well, on my blog. Somebody could find that. Although there's one that I love that's done by BBC.com. But there was a short slideshow that was created by Anahad O'Connor of the New York Times. And I just saw that one day. She's an avid reader of the New York Times, coming from a background in journalism and business. She said, "We need these photographs here." And she called Glenn Reese, whose quote you read at the beginning of this session, and said, "Find out how to get it." I think they contacted Mark first. Mark Wortman contacted me and said, "Let's find out how much it would cost to ship this to Australia." I was in the throes of moving back to the U.S., and so, frankly, not only was I thrilled at the idea, but I was glad to not have to be looking for other venues. And they made it all happen. It was really all their efforts that they went looking for help. They were able very early on to get support from Nutricia, a company that had supported me in having the exhibits in Europe. Again, I have a Europe set and a U.S. set of the exhibit. And Nutricia was a wonderful support for me. They sponsored the first 4 shows in Europe, and they gave me some support from the book, which allowed the publisher to make the book so accessible by its price. It's under $25 for a book with 110 color photos in it, which is really unheard of. And that was really thanks to Patricia giving a subvention that let the publisher do what they wanted to do and make it available to everybody, not just a coffee table book for art connoisseurs. So really all the credit goes to Alzheimer's Australia, which saw it as a vehicle for getting out their message.
And what was their message? What was it that they saw in your exhibit that made them say, "Oh, this is what we have to show"?
I think the people from Australia who spoke to it said it that we need to have people focus on the fact that people are still able to do things. They're not empty. We echoed each other so much. They're not empty shells. They're still there. They have many capacities. It's our job to find those capacities and nourish them together with them and be partners with them, and not give up and just the losses are real, but so is the love, which can come not only from family members, but from volunteers, from professionals, from all kinds of people can give loving care, and we can learn from them. Those of us who are dealing with someone we love, we can learn to do it better. None of us go into this being wise about how to deal with it. So there are always things to learn. And the main lesson, I think, is what Richard says all the time: say hello, not goodbye. So really, I can't thank Alzheimer's Australia more. And they had just wonderful teams. They do extraordinary things. And they have a big staff, and that staff is active. They have a huge number of volunteers. And they just put everybody onto this. I convinced them in the beginning to hire somebody who would go with the show to each of the 7 cities, because it's a job to set it up. There's 84 photographs in the regular show, and once they added the Australian ones in, there were more than 100. And so they hired this wonderful woman, Claire Thackway, and she's gone around to each of the venues and gotten the installation up and done things and arranged for press. Again, they've just done an exquisite job, and anybody who wants to do something with this should talk to me about how to talk to the Australians.
Okay. I just put in your email address into the chat box. There are a few questions. Okay. Pat Cohen from Chicago says that she especially loved your before and after pictures from Silverado. I think those are amazing too. She'd love to use them for my training events. Is that possible?
Yes, it's possible, and let me think how to do it. I'll say this, and if somebody takes a note, we can post it on something later, Laura. I have a very out-of-date website. I haven't done anything to try to update it lately, but it's called. I give these things easy names to remember. It's www.alivewithalzheimers.com. I created it for the book, just like I created a new website for this new book. If you go to that website, and again, you'll see things that are really out of date, but there's a section that says press. And if you go to press, then it says something about their photos. There are about 20 or 25 photos there. You click on select all, and you can download them from there, and you're more than welcome to use those. If you have a problem, write to me, but please try to start by getting them from there. I ask everybody to use the photos with a credit, please, and encourage people that, I mean, there still are copies of Alive with Alzheimer's, but there aren't very many, so I'm not really trying to do much with that. But the message of Alive with Alzheimer's is the same. But I think all those photos that I just showed you, the before and after ones, are on there. And again, I ask people not to go show every one of my photos because I'll never get an invitation to go anywhere if you show photos. And I'm a better traveler, and I love to go places, and I love to speak. So don't replace me, but I'm glad to have you use them. One of the things I would have shown you had I continued with that little slideshow is that there are a couple of reasons why these photos caught on as they did. I met wonderful people from the beginning who had been writing wonderful books and articles and giving wonderful talks. I didn't invent any of these ideas, but they didn't have images to show. And so Peter Whitehouse and Myrna Downs and many other people got in touch with me almost from the beginning and said, can we use your photos? You're showing what we've been talking about. And we agree that if people can see it, it's like that old, if you build it, they will come. Was it from that movie about they're building the baseball park out in Iowa or something? So I admit it didn't hurt that I have a PhD, but I got to meet some of these wonderful people very early on because my photos illustrated what they've said far better than I have. So it's not a new message, but what's new is that. And the other photos I would have shown you are all of people who look miserable. That's what's around. Or there are a few examples of books now that are nice and that aren't posed photos. Judith Fox's I Still Do. The difference in them is that they're about one person. And what I've tried to do is make this not about one person, and in the second book, not about one place, and even not about one country, but just to say, hey guys, this is, it's pretty easy. The things, we don't need to go to school for 10 years to learn about how to communicate better with people with dementia and how to smile and how to go slower and do the kinds of things that enrich their lives, and in doing so, enrich our lives.
We have a couple of other questions. There's a question from John Sandblum who said, and I'm going to put two questions together here because he said, beautiful photography and a good story, wondering how widely it has been on display in the U.S., coupled with a question from Walter, who asked, how receptive have you found the American Alzheimer's Association to person-centered care and photos like yours? So you could probably put those two together.
The first one is a little bit easier, and thank you, John, for the comment. It hasn't been circulated widely. That's my fault. We had it, as I said, for 6 months in 2010 at the National Academy of Sciences, and I was very busy working on the book, so I didn't do a lot to get it circulated from there. That opportunity also had come up at the very last minute, and so I hadn't done anything for other places. I put it in storage for about a year. I also was living in Europe, and it was easier for me to organize exhibits in Europe, and I did that very energetically and had ADI helping. So it's been in a lot of places in Europe, but it stayed in storage for a while. Then when the book was being released, a friend who was the president of Pace University was visiting, and he saw a copy of the draft of the book, and he said, how can I help get this out? And I said, you could put it up at your university at the time the book is released. And he said, done. So it went to Pace for 6 weeks. At that point, I will tell you without elaborating, at that point I was battling with a metastatic breast cancer and trying to move back to the U.S., and I didn't have much energy to look for new venues. So I didn't do that until recently. And now I'm hot on the trail of trying to get it around. And the first place that we put it now is there are 22 of the photos in Palm Springs right now at the Palm Springs Art Museum in Palm Desert. They're only up for a month. So I have 22 of them here and the rest of them in Baltimore, and I'm eagerly looking for support to make the cost of that, okay for the institutions wouldn't have to support it fully. But I'm also looking for people who have connections to their local museums or libraries or any other place who'd like to see it there. We'd really like to travel it. So that's the first one. The second question is about the Alzheimer's Association. I wasn't in the U.S., so I've had a lot of connections with the French and the Australian Alzheimer's Associations, but not much here. In New York, when we had the exhibit at Pace, I set up a symposium which Richard Taylor participated in, and Bob DeMarco came. I was there during. Mike Splain came, so we had a wonderful symposium, and it took a little work. But near the last moment, the New York City chapter agreed that they would sponsor it with us, and I was delighted at that, and I'm still delighted at that. But it wasn't easy to get them on board in the beginning, but they were wonderful once they were. Then I didn't really have any connections with other people. I tried a couple of other things. A wonderful donor bought books. You could, if you buy a bulk set of the books, if you have 50 books or more, and I actually think they'll do it with fewer, the publisher will sell them for $12.50 each, and a number of places have bought them and given them as gifts at dinners and other things. A wonderful donor who wanted to remain anonymous bought between 300 and 400, I don't remember, and put them in the gift bags of everybody at the gala that was held in New York City in November of 2012. That was a joint effort with the Alzheimer's Association. Mm-hmm. My only other connection really has been recently, where somebody here in the Coachella Valley, which is where Palm Springs is, saw the book, met me and saw the book just as I was leaving for Australia, and said, when you come back, we're going to put this exhibit up here. And before I could say go, she had arranged with the Palm Springs Art Museum in Palm Desert to put a piece of it immediately. So it was the fastest turnaround I've ever seen with getting a venue, and I'm grateful to Ann Gimbel for that. And I'm hoping that but now, as I said, I'm hopeful now that we'll get more things. And the other website, Love, Loss, and Laughter, has a lot of photos that I just showed you, some of them, photos of prior exhibits. So if you have any ideas about sharing the work with someone and saying you should invite this, that you could show them that. And also the BBC.com little 5-minute clip from BBC.com that, again, if you type BBC.com and Love, Loss, and Laughter, or my name, you'll see that. It's a really easy way to show somebody what these photos are.
Okay. Well, you're talking about other venues in the States, and Jeannie Lee from Hawaii said that she'd be in touch with her local museum to see if they would be interested in having your exhibit. And there was another question asking about what kind of space you prefer to exhibit in. What's the ideal space?
Well, I don't think that I have an ideal space. I mean, some people think, oh, well, this has to go in a medical facility. And I say, no. I'm happy to have it in a medical facility. And somebody in Princeton, New Jersey is trying to get it into a new hospital there. I'm happy to have it in a medical facility. But these photos are meant to be seen by everybody, because it's about creating this dementia-friendly community. That's the phrase that is not only a phrase, but it's being enacted in places. And we have to change the way people treat people with dementia, and that will change their lives and our lives. So it's meant to do that. Sometimes, I have to admit, in Salamanca, when we had it in this beautiful art gallery, we put outside Love, Loss, and Laughter, and we didn't put the subtitle of Seeing Alzheimer's Differently. Oh. By the way, in Australia, they do say they, with my permission, changed it to Love, Loss, not the book, but the exhibit, to Love, Loss, and Laughter, Seeing Dementia Differently, because that's the phrasing they use. And Corinne had my permission to change the film to Love, Loss, and Laughter. I think it's actually listed as living, or maybe it's the Seeing Dementia Differently. But those changes are not on the book, but on other things. sorry, I lost my train of thought where I was going with that, but in the Salamanca place, that we didn't put the seeing Alzheimer's differently on it, because we said if people see that outside, they might not go in. But Love, Loss, and Laughter sounds appealing, and so when they got inside, they were greeted by a picture of Mrs. Morimoto singing and some other joyous photos, and then they saw that it was about Alzheimer's, and many of them did stay. So I'm happy to play that game if that's what it takes. I just want people to see that people are still there and still capable of doing many things, and we have to invite them to do them and help them to do them.
So Frida wondered if the film's available on DVD, the Australian film, for those who are not able to see it on YouTube.
No, it's not. It's not on a DVD. It really was just released on World Alzheimer's Day, so it's brand new. I know that there are ways that people who are more technically proficient than I am are able to convert the clip to something that can be shown without because people want to show it sometimes. They use the BBC.com 5-minute piece in talks and other things. I've had a lot of people say they're using it in classes and they're using it in their own lectures. And there is a way to just convert it to a WAV file, but I don't know how to do that. I just got a copy yesterday that a colleague of Corinne's made me a version that's on a DVD that I can put on a screen and do it as a revolving thing, so that if I did a book signing or something, I don't have to be online. We'll have to see if it goes onto something. Again, Corinne, as Laura said, Corinne did this completely with no funding. She did this out of her own pocket, and making a DVD, costs something. So I don't know whether that may happen later on. At the moment, I think the more hits we can get on YouTube, the more maybe we'll get somebody to put some money up to make it as a film that could be used that way.
I know we didn't get to see an awful lot of the film in one chunk, which is too bad, and I hope that you'll be able to all see it on YouTube after this, that you'll be encouraged to watch it. But for what we did see, I was wondering how much you noticed about the different types of programs available in Australia. A couple of them that were highlighted. One of them was called the Men's Sheds, and there was another kind of a daycare that I think that the younger gentleman went to. I think his name is Gary. During the day, and that he is working on advocating for residential care, which is a long-term care for people who have early onset. John Sandblum, you'll know that in our group we sometimes refer to that as the commune that we want to start. But residential care is long-term care, and he wants to start one for, I know everybody wants it. It'll be the most fun place on earth, I think. Anyways, so it's kind of neat to be that there's a country where somebody with younger onset dementia is able to even think about advocating for residential care for people with younger onset, so that the activities are designed for people in that age group and all the residents are in that age group. So where was I going with this? So I wondered if you could reflect, especially the men's sheds, because I know it was a little hard to figure out what the men's sheds were from the film. So could you elaborate on that? Because you took some photos there.
A little bit. I was taken in the Sydney area. I was taken by the New South Wales chapter of the Alzheimer's Association to photograph in a number of places, and two of them were men's sheds. I never had heard of them before that, but there's evidently a big movement in Australia. I will misrepresent it with apologies. I don't remember how old it is. I think it's about 5 years old, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more. Where they were concerned that many men, when they retired, didn't have enough to do, and that comradeship and friendship between men is a very strong value in Australia. Mateship is referred to, M-A-T-E ship. It's my mates. They didn't see their mates anymore, and were too often at home without enough activities. So somehow somebody got the idea of creating these sheds where they could go and do the kind of handiwork that they often did at home, of making things out of wood, making things out of metal, making bird cages, other things, but primarily to socialize with other men. And so these were opened around the country. I have no idea how many there are now, but the two that I went to were really just wonderful. They had a group of men there. These are not dementia specific by any means, but at one place there were two men who were there the day I went who had diagnoses and had fairly advanced dementia. But they were treated like everybody else by the other guys there, and they just were happy as clams to have company, to have a place to go that was not a day program, of the sort that we know about. But they were accepted fully. They were treated gently and kindly by the other people there. There were limits for both of them at that one place about what machines they could use, because they were concerned that for both of them their focus wasn't as good as it had been on some things, and that they could be dangerous. So people helped them find the things that they still could do. And the wife of one of them just said his life just completely turned around when he started coming to the men's shed and had comradeship and did this. So that was great. At the second place, there was a man named Jimmy. I think that's the photo that was on there, and that we put at the exhibit. And Jimmy loved gardening, and he was there when I got there. He was talking about vegetables in the garden that he was tending with the mayor of the town, who came one day a week to participate, and he just felt like an important person and doing just the kind of thing he liked to do. So I think it's great just as a movement, but it certainly was terrific for these people. In terms of Gary and Mandy, I'm just totally in love with them. I hope you got the sense of them. They're just terrific. And the picture that I liked the best that I took, the photo I took the best, was the one where I had them under their umbrella in their backyard that said "Famous Around the World." And I said, well, I'm taking this photo and then we'll have to make it true. So hopefully the film was helping to do that. But they are just full of joy and laughter and creative ways to deal with their own lives, but also to try to contribute. So that's Gary's dream, is to help create some kind of residential centers, but that's not something that's happened yet. He's created the foundation. But there was the week that I came, the first time, there had just been a huge conference in Australia on younger onset Alzheimer's, and they're doing separate ones all around the country in the 8 states. So it's really a high priority now. And they have anybody can go on their website. There was a one of the photos we had. I made a note. Let me see where it was. There was something behind Jack when he was talking at one time. There's a book behind, and they have tons of publications, and one of them is something called "We Can, We Can, We Can," and it's a terrific publication about all the things that we still can do. So again, I can't speak highly enough about the kinds of activities and publications, and we can tap into that. And learn something from them even from afar. Or we'll just organize a group trip and we'll all go. I'm going back there in March because I saw absolutely wonderful places where the woman with the dolls, I showed you one photo, the woman with the dolls it's a public residential center. Has 4 cottages with 15 people in each one. One of them is a locked unit for people who are in danger, at risk of leaving, but the others are open units. And it's the most joyous residential places I've ever seen. And it's a director who read everything that people that we've read things from have written, and said, okay, well, I'm just going to put them all to work. So he's done the environmental things, the intergenerational things, the art things, everything you can imagine, all in one place, including the group of women who put together a book of stories that they got teenagers to help with. And the 13 authors decided that once they did that, they could do something else. And so they decided to make a calendar. Remember the movie Calendar Girls? So they said, well, we'll make our own Calendar Girls kind of calendar. And they found a photographer who took these gorgeous photos. You can tell they're not wearing anything, but you can't see the things you shouldn't be seeing. And I thought it's just so full of joy that so I'm going to go back and photograph there and in another place and try to say, here are the kind of places we should be creating everywhere.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Pat Cohen says, Kathy, have you contacted or tried to visit at any of the Eden Project facilities in the U.S.?
I've certainly read a lot about them from the day that I went to Silverado, or the day I stopped photographing at Silverado, because it was so consistent with everything that I saw there. I think a couple of the places that I've been actually are also Eden certified, but I haven't gone to a place just for that. I really stopped photographing a while ago. I still take photos when I can, but I was more involved in writing the book, getting it together, getting myself together, getting myself back to the U.S. and back on my feet. So I'm starting to photograph again, but not with anything near the fervor of something before. I'm mostly trying to add to my set of photos on the use of art and music and dance. And it's a separate little exhibit of 36 photos that has been up in several places in Europe. I keep trying to bring it here, but every time I start to bring it here, it's in one small box, so it doesn't cost the same thing as bringing the larger exhibit. It gets invited someplace else over there, so it's now up in Haifa, and I'm going there to give a keynote address on a conference on Alzheimer's and creativity in November, and maybe it'll come back here, so I'm trying to augment that with some new things. I met a woman the other night who teaches tap dancing at a couple of facilities in the Palm Springs area. People are on in top hats and white shirts and pink bows and midriffs, and it's just great. So I'm trying to get more things to stimulate people's imagination of saying there's so much we can do.
Mm-hmm. Pat had made a comment earlier on in the chat that she said, let me see if I can find it. Well, she said, hearing all your stories makes me embarrassed for how little we do in the United States. I wanted to, Pat, in some ways you're right, and we all beat ourselves up over here. But, a lot of Kathy's photos were taken in the States, and it's where she got started. So in the States, we have Silverado. We have the wonderful places that she photographed in New York. We have Judy Berry's, the Lakeview Ranch, and she has her whole model of dementia care, which actually she's going to be on here on December 10th discussing her model of care and her experiences. So, there's lots of shining lights out there. There's lots of people doing really neat things. What might be lacking is a national effort to pull together and publicize this there's just lots of little efforts and a big effort with the Eden Alternative, but there's no big effort to publicize this as this should be the model of care. And I would hazard a guess that it's the same in other countries. We see that home in the Netherlands where they've created basically a community of people with dementia. And the staff are acting as people who are working in this community. So they're working at the grocery store, at the hair salon, at the dry cleaners, But, we only see that one place. So we can't say, well, that's the model of care all across the Netherlands, just like Kathy's photos don't show the whole model of care across the United States or across Canada. But, it's a start. So.
Yeah, Laura, if I can interrupt too, because I've just seen a comment from John from John Sandblom about the photo that I said was used to represent this. You're totally right, John. Of course, that photo is part of the story, and there was some of the photo you saw also a photograph from the Dominican Republic and others. I don't pretend for a minute that sadness and loss is not a critical part of the story. It's just that that's the only thing that some people see. And I'm trying to shake that of saying that's part of it, and it's real and it's painful, but we don't know how to get rid of that. And the only thing we know now, but it's important, is that we know how to not make that just the story, and how to expand the story to include all those positive moments and things. So I apologize to anybody if I in any way implied that the loss isn't part of it, but when I started looking for places to photograph, and as I continue to photograph, I say, don't show me bad care. I know what that's like. Laura knows what that's like. We all know what that's like. But not enough people know what good care looks like and how powerful it can be in turning people's lives around, not back to before there was a diagnosis or before there were problems. But it's not all that. One of the things I'm doing right now, I'm working with my husband, who's also a sociologist, and with Richard and and with another friend who's a clinician. And we're trying to do an analysis of the images of dementia in mainstream movies. So Richard posted recently this list of 11 movies. I've just expanded it by 2 more that show dementia. And the dilemma is we've got a wonderful set of maybe 100 people on this today, and there are thousands of people who have seen my photographs in Australia. But every time there's a movie released, like Iris or the Iron or any one of these movies about dementia, it's seen by millions and millions of people. And for many people, that's the only vision that they have of it. And they think that this end stage is the picture. I mean, even when they're well done and we see people who are just, losing all their capacities, and the tragedy is what comes through, rather than the tragedy mixed with the hopeful kinds of things that we'd like to have accompany it. So, I've certainly emphasized the positive. No apologies for that. But I think we don't see that enough, and I'm happy to be showing it and to have people say, let's strive for as much of that as we can.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. John says that I respect that you used a wide variety of photos. Wasn't pointing to the job you are doing, which is great. Just the gap you talk about in general perception. So why is that perception still out there? It's one of the things, some of us are doing what we can to change, but as we all know, change can be slow. So, yeah, I mean, it was interesting that out of all those photos that you had, that the one that they latched onto, that the media latched onto, was of people like this, which is, as you point out, it's a very real experience, but it's not the only experience.
They were 2 men with Lewy body, and so it was very hard for them to deal with a lot of noise. And this, there was a particularly noisy moment. I love the photo; it's a good photo, but I hate to have that represent the work.
Right. So photos are taken out of context.
Yeah.
A lot of times. So knowing the context helps. Yeah.
And you will see if you look at the book and others that there are very, very few of my photos that are posed. I mean, I spend a lot of time with people, and I take tons of photos that I throw out because I'm trying to capture what I felt about them when I was there. So it's not by accident, but they're not the kind of classic, smiles that you sometimes see on there.
Right. Richard, I see that you're online now. I know you've had a terrible time trying to stay online. I think it must be the rain down in Houston. You don't know how to deal with it. So I was wondering if you had any comments or questions for Kathy. You guys go back a long way. So, Richard, are you there? Oops, hate to put him on the spot. Oh, no, he left and joined again. Okay, Richard, anytime you get a chance to just kind of chime in.
I want to say this to Kathy.
There he is.
Kathy, none of us have your photographic talent or your sociological perspective, but you are a living example of what one person can be as a difference maker in terms of awareness for people with dementia. And all of us who are watching, I'm sure, are both envious and proud of your efforts. And I just wanted to thank you on behalf of all of us for all that you have done. You are a connector of people. You are a collector of wisdom, and you demonstrate it through your photographs. And thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Richard. You're one of my favorite people on the planet, as I hope you know. And actually, I met you thanks to Laura, so Laura thinks that we go back way back.
Do.
You're right.
She told me that she had recently met you, and I said, well, I want to meet him too. I've met you.
It's true.
Put me in touch with him. So we're a trio that way. So thank you. Your comments are very valuable to me. Laura, I'm also going to, in about 5 minutes, have to get off. We've gone so much longer than we anticipated.
Oh, my goodness, we have.
So thank you to everybody who stayed on this long. And I can stay a few more minutes, but I have something I have to do exactly at noon. But it's at home, so I'm not rushing out the door.
Any last minute questions for Kathy? I have one last minute question, but.
But I really do welcome messages from people. I'm a little bit drowning in email, so I'll be slow answering, but I really will answer you. So, please stay in touch. I'd love being on these sessions.
I wanted to ask you, Alzheimer's Australia appears to be really on the leading edge of dementia awareness and of inclusiveness and of person-centered care, and the Alzheimer's Association there seems to be squarely behind all the efforts that are going on. That seems to be a commonality that maybe they share with Alzheimer's UK, that in a lot of the dementia-friendly community efforts there, the Alzheimer's Society is behind that as well in terms of providing support and people to help with the effort. To me, that seems to be a major difference between here in North America and the countries that are starting to get it right. Do you think Alzheimer's Australia is getting it right, and is it because they have a lot? What's different about that than us in Alzheimer's Australia? What's different than what you experience in other countries?
Well, I think often there's grassroots change, and that's critical. And I think we're on this program we're an example of grassroots, grassroots effort to change and move it up. But it's hard to replace top-down leadership that says what's important and that says that care for people living with dementia now is important. And I don't know enough about the history of Alzheimer's Australia, but certainly right now, I mean, the leadership is just focused on so many of the things that all of us on this program now value. And often, unfortunately, when Ronald Reagan made an announcement of having Alzheimer's disease, I think it really made a huge and wonderful difference. But he then was sequestered off to a private mansion in California, and we never saw him again.
Right.
So he didn't continue really to be, the influence that he might have been had he been willing, or had his wife been willing to keep him in the public eye. But we're in a society that's very celebrity oriented, and often if you get somebody that that pays attention to a celebrity, that makes a difference. I don't want to talk about American politics this morning because it's not a very happy topic today. I don't know who I would recommend. I don't think anybody would listen to just anybody, but there are other people who can play a powerful role if we can get them to speak out not only about research, but to speak out about care and about helping people learn what we can all do, that we can all be part of it. And I think that's some of what's happening in the UK. Certainly there's been leadership for a long time. Norrie Graham was the first president of the Alzheimer's Society, and she continues to be a very active person in changing the views of people in the UK. And that society has, but David Cameron making it a national priority and doing things, has made a big change there. And that we need to find some people who are respected, who will step out and say, let's do this together.
Jeannie Lee also pointed out that in Australia was one of the first countries to have somebody with Alzheimer's, Christine Bryden, on their national board. So that probably made a big difference too. Okay, Kathy, thank you so much for being here, and I hope we can have you back one day. And again, I encourage everybody to take a look for this book on Amazon, Love, Loss, and Laughter. The cover is very distinctive, so you'll be able to find it quite easily. And it should be on everybody's bookshelf. It's one of the preeminent publications on Alzheimer's today.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody. I will keep this list of chats. I think that it will stay up when I sign off. I hope it will.
It won't. So copy and paste it. I'll do that. Let's see if I can grab it all.
Send it to me. I will in the next couple of days try to answer some of you that I couldn't look at all the things on the screen at the same time, so I wasn't following as closely as I should have.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And everybody.